Hello and welcome to Books and Beyond. I'm Jimmy Bennett, your host. Books and Beyond is the show where we hope to help people personify their aspirations. Now today, before I get to my new guest, I got two things I want to talk about. One is the new green screen behind me. That is a shot of BB Cove and Noank. I just think it looks great, adds a little something to the show. And also I'd like to talk about the Southeastern chapter of the Connecticut Authors and Publishers Association. This is a group that I belong to, and my guest today belongs to it. It's a group of writers, publishers, editors, anybody that has anything to do with the written word, illustrators, whatever. And we used to meet every Monday. We will meet every Monday, every third Monday of the month. And we have a new meeting place now, the Groton Public Library. The last 2 years, because of the pandemic, we ended up doing Zoom meetings, which were great in some ways because you could get people from all over the country to be your guest speakers and stuff. But sometimes it's like watching a middle school fire safety program too. So it's really going to be nice to get back in person. So I hope that all my fellow Kappa members out there will put aside the date. Now, this month it's a little off because of the Juneteenth holiday. The library will be closed that Monday. So we're going to be doing it on Thursday, the 23rd at 6:30 at the Groton Public Library. I hope all our members will try to make an effort to show up and reconnect with everybody, and anybody else out there who would be interested in joining or seeing what we're about, please come by. All right, enough of that. Let's get to my guest, Larry Zaccaro.
Hi, Jim. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, Larry, I think you set the record as the most appearances on the show.
This might
so
be
far.
my fifth time,
I
including
think
hosting
fifth,
once.
and you hosted one time.
Right.
For me, which was great. But Larry's a prolific writer. He keeps busy, so he's always got something new to tell us about. So anyways, I'm going to turn it over to Larry, let him explain a little bit about who he is and what he does, and we'll take it from there.
All right. Thanks again, Jim. So I am actually a scientist by degree and training, had a long career in research and business development at Pfizer in this area. And when my career at Pfizer ended, I started embarking on some of the creative projects I had in my mind all along. And as ideas came up, I put them together as the opportunity arose. So that was a whole second career for me now after my life in science at Pfizer in this area. So if you would like, I could get right into discussing a few of those projects.
First thing I'd like to talk about is your game, wordplay.
Yep, wordplay. So wordplay actually arose out of an idea I had when I was very young. It was sort of in the back of my mind the whole time, but then as soon as I ended my career at Pfizer, I started putting together some of the specific details about what the cards would look like and what the directions would be. It is a word creation game using cards. 7 cards in your hand, a letter on each card, and a point value for each letter. And each turn you lay down cards on the table to make words or add to someone else's word and keep a running total of points. So think of it as a combination of Scrabble, which is word creation, and gin rummy. So if we get the cover of wordplay up on the screen for a second, you can see that the word wordplay is an ambigram. It reads exactly the same upside down as right side up. I can't rotate that on the screen, but if you look at it, you can see that. That actually came out of an idea I had with the wordplay to design it that way, just for an extra added artistic component of it. Now, the next screen has a sample play laid out of the cards in wordplay as if 4 people were playing. And I'll just walk everyone through very quickly. As if 4 people were playing, this is what it would look like. It builds out on the table around you as you're playing. Now, the first player at the top puts down owl, gets the points for that. Then the next player sees that owl and actually creates the word howling. You can see the H-I-N-G there. He makes the word howling and gets the points for the whole word. The third player puts down a BR using the ing from the second player. So it's creating a new word using cards that are already on the table, gets the points for that, and you keep a running total of points as the game is played. The fourth player makes breeze using the BR that the third player made. Back to the first player, the SN there, they make sneeze. So you can see you can reuse letters that are on the table to create a new word, keep a running total of points, or lay down a brand new word at any turn, keep a running total. When all the cards are played, at the end of the round, whoever has the most points wins. So you can see by creating a brand new word, it's not like Scrabble. You can just lay it down on the table and make a new word. But the whole key is word building and keeping a track of the points that you've earned on each turn. So it is a game that can be used by kids learning to read, a family game, a party game, or a retirement game. So it's really,
You've actually distributed a lot to education.
yeah, my biggest sales are with teachers and parents looking for an exercise of word building for the kids. So it's been quite.
That's great. I mean, that is, I have to say, I've always admired that to put it all together like that, and and from start to finish, it's pretty impressive, Larry.
Well, thanks. That was about 10 years ago, actually. I put that together. It's been on the market for that long. So people can contact me directly for that game, or it's available at some local stores, or maybe the best place online is actually Etsy if people are looking for that. So
all right.
That was my first creative endeavor that came out a while ago.
So what got you into writing?
Well, I have to tell you truthfully that when I was a kid, my dad, who was a PhD in mathematics, wrote a math book. And I was so impressed with that he wrote this very complicated math textbook that it always stuck with me, that he wrote that and this tangible product of a book. And I've always been a storyteller. From the time I was 6 years old, I actually told my first story in a written form, which was actually a long comic strip with dinosaurs and monsters. But I told my first story in written form when I was 6 and always did well in creative writing throughout school and after that. But I've always been fascinated and continuously have ideas for stories and look at something that may prompt me for a story. Now, one thing, the next book, or my first children's book, Amy and the Orca, is a good example of the kind of inspiration that can happen to people. And I encourage everyone, anything around you that happens in life can give you ideas for stories. My family and I were on a orca watching trip off the west coast of the United States near the San Juan Islands. My oldest daughter, Lauren, had her flute with her on the boat. We saw a lot of orcas, but as the day went on, there was one point when she started to play her flute at my suggestion. As we watched, 2 female orcas were swimming, and as they got closer, you could see them going slower and slower. With each breath, they hesitated longer and longer at the surface till they got to their closest point of the boat, stopped in the water, and sang back to her flute.
Wow.
So that was obviously a very magical moment that really happened to us. And I've told that story in my speeches at Toastmasters or to people many times. But actually, about 4 years ago, my mother passed away. I was very sad and emotional, of course. And then a week later, one of my favorite musicians also passed away, someone who I've been a fan of for 50 years, who happens to be a flute player. And I was talking about this with my partner, Yvette. And she said, that story of the orca and Lauren's flute would make a great children's book. And I was so emotional at the time, especially from my mother passing away, that the idea for the story, as soon as she said that, just all came clear to me within a day. So I wrote the story, made it a little bit of a fictional backstory with a younger girl learning to play the flute. Nobody wanted to hear her play the flute, so she gets sad, except for the orca whale swimming by, who hears her flute and gets excited and stops and sings back to her. That book became Amy and the Orca, which is out here, and that's available on Amazon or from me again, or local bookstores also have that. So that idea, you know, a magical moment, but to pull the whole thing together with a story, a backstory, hire a good artist to make the pictures, the colorful pictures that are part of it. That whole process was actually...
Did you know the artist, or did you go look for an artist?
I did not actually. I got the connection from a mutual friend who I met at Toastmasters, actually. She told me about an artist she knew about who lives in the Chicago area. Ariel is her name. And I contacted her electronically, and the whole process is I have these 20, 25 ideas for what the pictures should look like, describe them in a few sentences. She would do a pencil sketch as a preliminary content. I would approve those or give her suggestions, and then she finally came up with the final color pictures. And just, you can see from the cover, just wonderful, colorful things that it's a great story for young kids, for like toddlers to have the story read to them because of the bright colored pictures. Also kids just reading, like first, second grade, will have no trouble reading that on their own.
Well, a lot of people have approached me and said, you know, well, I'm sure you get the same thing. A lot of people like approach me and say, you know, oh, I always wanted to write a book. Mm-hmm. How do you do that? How do you do that? And I always tell them the same thing. You sit down and you write it. That's the only way you're going to do it.
That's the only way it's going to get done.
You got to make yourself sit down, you know, in front of the typewriter, computer, pencil, book, whatever, and you got to write.
I have a lot of ideas for stories, but it takes almost some kind of an event or some kind of, you know, coalescing of the ideas to really see the story in your mind.
Right.
And once once you start writing, you get to know the characters. And once you know the characters and what they need to accomplish to make the story come through, to have a conclusion, to bring the readers through the story to the end, the characters take care of most of that for you. If you know who they are, then you know what they're going to say, how they're going to behave.
It's just like if you're sitting around with a bunch of old friends, you pretty know how they're going to react to one thing or another.
I think Wally Lamb actually describes his writing as playing with his friends.
Yep.
So, that's exactly what it is. If you know who they are, then they can take care of most of the details of the story for you.
Well, that's the reason why I was asking about the artist is because, you know, a lot of people thought, even I at times had thought about a children's book, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But I, you know, can't draw a lick, you know.
I can do cartoon sketches.
Yeah,
but I'm not an artist.
Yeah, right.
So,
so finding the right artist, and obviously you found a good one, which is very important. If you can find that right artist who can bring your vision, you know, actually illustrate your vision. Right. That's pretty special.
She was wonderful at that. Like I said, the first depiction of the pictures of the illustrations was a few sentences from me on what I want to depict in this, or what this needs to show in the context of the story. And then it was only two or three iterations to get them exactly right, and left all the colors and the fine details to her, and she just did a wonderful job.
Nice. Very good. So your next project.
So my next project.
Well, that was quite a turnaround.
Convergent is a bit different than a children's book. It's not light, but I will tell you, it's a book that is about 40 years in the making. So some of the ideas in Convergent I had started coalescing in my mind not long after my father passed away over 40 years ago. It's been 45 years now. About really far-reaching important things like mortality or the meaning of life, believe it or not. I actually wrote about that in some detail. But don't be fooled, it's not a sappy, feel-good story. Some of the ideas in Convergent are expressed in the context of a very gripping story. What I have is two parallel stories. a 2,000-year-old biblical story with a familiar character and a contemporary science teacher. Now, the chapters alternate, but as the story develops, you realize the similarities between the characters and the story that's developing all converge, hence the title, Converge at the end, and you realize all along it's been one story. But the whole core of it, the whole foundation of it is laid in these ideas of God, of love, and how we need to treat each other, and that heaven and hell are not places we're going to go, but earth. The surface of the earth is the only place we're ever going to live. How we treat each other, whether we do it with love or not, is going to be the real, tangible state of the earth in the long run. If we use love as our foundation, then earth will be as a self-sustaining, fertile paradise, heaven. If we don't, it'll be a scorched, obliterated rock in space, a living hell, literally. Now, the story itself revolves around just a few select characters, but those ideas come out and as the story develops, and there's a bit of science fiction that kind of ties the whole thing together. So, very thought-provoking, but still a fictional thriller, a story. There's a bad guy, there's some very good and some very bad things happen in it that carry the reader along, hopefully to get them thinking about some of these new ways to look at things.
Now, I can see with your scientific background that the science aspect of the book must have come a little easier to you than the philosophical.
The scientific part is biology 101. Right? So everybody knows the basic components of the science: DNA, RNA, protein. We all know about RNA much more than we used to after vaccinations now.
Right.
But the philosophical parts, I had mentioned before, when my father passed away, started bringing these ideas into my mind that I was thinking much more about. Important things like our coming to grips with our own mortality, which I don't think most people or a lot of people really don't accept. There's a bit of a denial there. But if we are all mortal, our time alive is so unique, so special. Think about the universe stretches to infinity in time and space, and we get our little 80-year window in that infinity. How special and unique is that?
Right.
That's what's important. How we focus on how we treat each other and what we accomplish in our lives is the important thing. Those are all come out in the story, but it's not a self-help book. It's not a,
right.
It's not a.
No, it's not a preachy.
It's not nonfiction. It is hopefully a thriller. The story carries itself, and those ideas come out throughout the story.
Good.
So that I actually wrote during the pandemic in early 2020. Now, I had written an older version of that novel, and I actually had adapted that to a screenplay for a movie. But what I did is I took the screenplay and adapted that back into a novel, and that became Convergent, which is out now also on Amazon. But in that same year, do you want to ask any more questions about that, or
No, I'm good with Convergent. Yeah, I've read it. It's good.
Yeah, thanks. Right in that same year, in 2020, I had this long-standing idea for another book, which again is much lighter. It's not.
Right.
It's not thought-provoking. It's not a science fiction thriller. It is a romantic comedy called Chandler's List, and the play on the title is intentional, but it's set here in Southeast Connecticut. But some of the scenes, some of the events in that story take the main characters all over New England. So they're in Maine, they're on Cape Cod, they're at Fenway Park, they're at local beaches here, they're at the Nautilus, they're at the Charles Morgan at Mystic Seaport. They're a 40-ish couple with 3 very demanding children who are reaching teenage years, and they're kind of burned out from their work and their debt and the demands of their jobs and their kids. And they are falling out of love. There's a lot of tension in their marriage. But this story is a romantic adventure that they embark on to rekindle their romance and their love. So it really is a romantic comedy that I have to admit, when I was writing it, I envisioned some actors, like a Paul Rudd, Tina Fey kind of couple.
Right.
And a lot of the humor in it is things that the kids do. And a lot of that is based on real things that I did when I was a kid, or my siblings did, or some things that my own children did, and worked those into what was happening in the story. And so they, a spoiler alert, they rekindle their love through this adventure that they're on, and it all comes together with a happy ending. And so it's a much lighter, but not for kids. It's for adults. If it was a movie, it'd probably be PG-13 or even R. But
Yeah.
But it's a short, fun ride.
Well, you see, that's what I find fascinating and I really admire switching gears like that. You know, that to me is really writing. It's you come up with it. I mean, what inspired you to do a romantic comedy? I mean, or is it you just have an epiphany, or?
No, the idea was there for many years, actually. And again, it was the same thing, that I had adapted it to a screenplay, or I'd written a screenplay first. And with all this extra time during the pandemic, I said, I can make this a book. And so I took the scenes and the stories and wrote that all. And a key component of it was, is it funny enough? So that I have enough humor, because it's not a serious book. It's a very light, it'll be an hour and a half comedy. And so I asked my siblings for what they remember when we were growing up. Give me some ideas of, funny, silly things that we did. And I thought about my own kids, and I worked those all into the story, and took some historic locations in this area and all over New England to make some of the key scenes. So like the Charles Morgan, like I said, or the Nautilus. Those are pretty important historical artifacts that are right in our backyard.
I've always liked that anyway. So, it's not often, but it's neat when you're reading a book to see places that you've been. Right. You can really see it then. You know exactly where it's at, and I like that. I've always admired that. In my books, I use Gillette's Castle, so it's, people that have been there and stuff can recognize the area and stuff like that. I did sort of the same thing with my fourth book, A Castle Christmas. I used all my same characters, though I did give them a little different personalities. Right. And, changed some of the attitudes around and some of the circumstances. But that's why I'm saying I admire the fact that you come up clean, fresh with, a new,
Those are all new characters. They're all fictional. And I created a local company, which will sound familiar. Some of the work that they do there is familiar to everyone here in southeastern Connecticut. But I actually asked my daughter, Lauren, who worked there, some funny things or some frustrating things that happen at work, and she actually gave me a couple of good ideas, and I worked those into the frustration that the main character, Tom is his name, Tom Chandler, what he's encountering at work, that worked on the humor as well, almost like Dilbert-like office stuff that you have to deal with. So they're all fiction, they're all fictional people and doing the real places but fictional events. So it was all just kind of a fun little ride, and it's a quick read. I mean, it's just like watching a movie.
Let's get to your last book here.
My last children's book. My last children's book is called Auntie Winty and the Plopes. And of course, that doesn't mean anything to anybody. But what this backstory on that was, Auntie Winty and Plopes were two things that my kids said when they were little that had no meaning. I think Auntie Winty was a mispronunciation of one of my aunt's names, Winifred, and Plopes is a completely made up word. So I only had those two nonsense words, and I crafted a story using those. Auntie Winty is a kind elderly woman who loses her husband and has really lost her happiness. She has a beautiful garden every year, and once Herb, her husband, passes away, she's lost her, not her will to live, but her happiness. She's really sad. And the Plopes are a made-up animal that live under her barn. They're completely fictional, and they have been relying on her garden for their food for the past many years. When they see her garden not planted that one spring, they get upset and actually plant the garden for her, for themselves, but they actually plant it for her. She sees it and wonders what in the world is happening to this. So she actually puts up a security camera, films them, realizes this is something completely new, but keeps it a secret. And the Plopes and Auntie Winty developed this friendship where they're mutually helpful with the garden and each other. So I'd liken it to the shoemaker, the elves and the shoemaker. It's got a little bit of a feel for that, but it actually happens. Again, it's in this area, in the house that I live in now, with the barn and the stone foundation and stuff. But it's a mutually caring and a feel-good story for kids. This one for kids a little bit older, 2nd, 3rd grade.
Yeah.
So that's out. That came out last year. So that's my last completed project. What I'm working on now is just a couple of books in the works. One is a baseball story, actually, with a woman baseball player, a girl. We follow her from when she's a child up through a professional career, first as a player and then as a manager. That's about a third of the way, or 40% done. And another one, which actually is the ideas of Convergent coalesced into a non-fictional that will be a non-fiction philosophical book, almost like a self-help or a thought-provoking book for people. That's in the works. That probably won't be out till next year.
Well, we'll be looking forward to it.
Thanks.
It's good to see you staying busy, and next time when that comes out, you'll have to come back on.
Happy to do it. Well, once again, thanks so much. I'll just say very quickly, I'm a member of Mystic Aquarium Toastmasters, and I can't talk enough about what a wonderful tool and organization it is to build up speaking skills. Contact me directly for information or go to the website. Thanks.
And real quick, me and Larry will be doing a air show.
Air show at Haddam, right?
At Haddam.
Near Goodspeed.
But we'll announce that a little bit more as we get closer to the date.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you so much. This has been Books and Beyond. I'm Jimmy Bennett, and we'll see you next time.